here to help you with breeze, planting seeds and teaching skills. Teachers turn schoolyards to dreams. Who hates school gardens with ease?
Hello and welcome to School Gardens with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Leila Mireskandari, and this is episode number 24. In this episode, I want to address one of the most common misconceptions about school gardens, and that is that they are expensive. Before we get into this important, fairly complicated, and somewhat controversial topic, I want to mention something that I think we all agree on. Money is a funny thing. Same amount of money means different things to different people. Some people think organic food is way too expensive, and the same people go and spend money on exclusive vacations that to me sounds really expensive. And I'm like, you argue over a few dollars on organic, non-organic food, but then you go around and spend that money on that. No judgment. What I'm trying to say is that people have different priorities when it comes to their money. It's also that sometimes budgets are tight, and when budgets are tight, people's perspective on cost is different. But what I have found is that most of the time when people say something is expensive, it's because they don't know the value of it, not that they don't have the money. I've been told that my $15 guides are way too expensive, and I've also been told that my $5,000 programs were a bargain. Same thing happens with the physical material that you want to spend money on to build a school garden. Some people think that $100 hose is way too much, and the same people sometimes think that $4,000 for a raised bed system is reasonable. So the word expensive is very subjective, and it has to do with the person's values, point of view, and sometimes how they're feeling in the moment they're saying something is expensive. It does also have to do with how much money is in their pocket, but usually it's more emotional than logical. And sometimes we think something is expensive just because everybody says that it is. And after over a decade of growing school gardens, I've come to a few conclusions on why people think that school gardens are expensive. Reason number one is that sometimes everybody just says so. Or, someone asks, but aren't school gardens too expensive? And then everybody nods their heads and they're like, oh, yeah, they're expensive. And after a few minutes, or even a few seconds, sometimes everybody's completely convinced that school gardens are expensive. I usually jump in and break that cycle as quickly as I can if I'm there. That I just say, not necessarily. It all depends on what you do and how you do it and all of that. And I'll give examples of, really low budget school gardens that I've seen built or I've helped build. And then that helps a little. Another reason is many examples of school gardens have turned out to be pretty expensive, because people think that sometimes that the challenge of growing a successful school garden can be solved by just throwing money at it. Or they fall into the traps some companies who are selling, aquaponics and hydroponics and tower systems and grow lights and things like that actually set up for them. Now, don't get me wrong. If a tower garden company comes to you with a comprehensive curriculum that's connected to your curriculum and, step-by-step plans and everything, go for it if you have the budget. I'm not against any of these systems. In fact, I am a fan of many of them, and I do have some of them and use some of them. For example, I do have grow lights that I use at the right time and the right place. But that's the thing. These systems have to be used at the right time and the right place. And many of them are, not suitable for a school environment or a classroom setting, unless they come with, thorough training for the teacher and a complete curriculum. Otherwise, they are a complete waste of money. And they should come to really dedicated teachers who are willing to spend a lot of extra time and effort making it work. And even if these projects are a success at first, they are usually not sustainable because they're very reliant on that way to a dedicated teacher. So people look at these types of projects and they say, oh, school gardens are expensive. Or when it comes to outdoor school gardens, Most examples are conventional gardens with, that require raised beds and containers. Sometimes they have complicated watering equipment, things like that. And those are expensive. Some school boards make it mandatory to install fences and ridiculous accessibility rules and regulations they have, like, pavements and things like that. And those are super expensive. Don't get me wrong, gardens have to be accessible, but sometimes these rules and regulations are way too unnecessary or way too much. Whenever I encounter these, I fight it. I go to meetings, I talk to committees, to create awareness, etc. Many expensive physical objects that people think that they have to buy for their school gardens are utterly unnecessary. Especially at the beginning. You don't have to have a garden and an outdoor kitchen and rain barrels and, three-tiered composting system, etc., etc. on the first year. You don't even need an outdoor space for crying out loud. Go listen to episodes number 6 and 7, where I explain to you how amazing and impactful and educational classroom gardens could be. But even if your mind is set at having an outdoor garden, which I completely understand because they are more exciting, a lot of what you think you have to buy for them or build for them are not necessary. You usually don't need a fence. You don't need an expensive watering system. You don't need wheelbarrows or big shovels. You don't need gloves. You don't even need raised beds or containers in most cases. I mean, if you have absolutely no grass areas to turn into a garden, you're in the middle of New York City on a slab of concrete, no nature, no nothing that you can turn into a garden, I understand. I'm not saying never have containers, but in most cases, you don't need them. So far, we said people think that school gardens are expensive because, number one, everybody just for no reason says so sometimes. And number two, most examples of school gardens turn out to be expensive just because people include things that they don't really need. And the third reason, in my opinion, is, and I really think that this is the most important reason, is that school gardens are often unsuccessful. Because remember, money is a funny thing. If people think something is not worth it, they think that even the smallest amount that they spend on it is a waste. Therefore, it's too expensive. And when communities spend money to build, a garden, and after much hard work and expenditures, they don't have much to show for it, in terms of the food that was grown or the education that happened, they think that money was wasted and they think that was too expensive. And the more examples of that we have, the more people are going to think that school gardens are expensive because they think every dollar spent on them is a waste of money. Now, don't get me started on why most school gardens are unsuccessful because this episode is never going to end because I have a lot to say about that. I have in many previous episodes talked about it and I will continue to talk about it. But let's keep focused in this episode. And to do that, I will briefly mention the very main reasons that school gardens are usually unsuccessful. Number one, school gardens that are led and grown by community and not by the teachers and grown not by the students they fail. Number two, school gardens that are built conventionally and therefore are very high maintenance, they fail. Number three, school gardens that are not connected to the curriculum and not grown inside the classroom and they're grown outside of the classroom time, they fail. I know for a fact that if a school garden is done right, meaning that it's led by teachers, grown by the students during the school day while connected to the curriculum, and are built with permaculture principles in mind, not only they're successful, but they're also much less expensive. So no, school gardens are not expensive because if done right, you don't need much and every penny that you spend is worth it. Hope this helps a little. So next time someone said school gardens are expensive, tell them that if they're done right, that's not the case, and send them to talk to me. I'll talk to you next week in another episode. You've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please share this episode with other teachers who might be interested in this topic. See you next week for a new episode.